Okay, here we go. All right, we are on our sheet. We are on Roman numeral 4, last letter A. Okay. Last time we did the basic kosher species. We did animals, birds, and fish. We saw how animals, the Torah lists rules and examples of kosher and non-kosher animals. When it comes to birds, the Torah just lists examples with no rules. And when it comes to fish, the Torah gives us rules but no examples. Interestingly, when it comes to birds, the rabbis over time developed, they kind of distilled rules for determining kosher and non-kosher birds based on the examples. So the Torah gives whatever, a dozen, 2 dozen examples, kosher, non-kosher. And so the rabbis, oh, this is what they all have in common. So basically, non-kosher birds are birds of prey. Kosher birds are not. Um, Kosher birds have a certain type of crop, which is reflective of their. Oh, let me. Someone's at the door. Do you want to get it? Okay.
Oh, it's the other side.
Okay. Somebody let them in there. It's okay. There's a buzzer here.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Okay. Hold on. Right. It looks like somebody let them in. Um, The signs are a gizzard that you can cut it open and peel with your hand, which reflects the diet of the bird, or a crop, which is another type of thing in the neck of the bird that it uses um, for digestion. And another notable sign of a kosher bird is that it has 3 toes and one, as opposed to a non-kosher bird has two and two. Okay, because a non-kosher bird, it's like a bird of prey, or it's like using its talons, like a parrot, to grasp something and hold something, whereas kosher bird is not doing that. So kosher bird, so I don't know, kosher birds, we did talk about this last time. It's chickens, geese, ducks, most chickens, quails, partridges. Okay, fine. The Torah also lists non-kosher parts of kosher animals, most famously the sciatic nerve, which there's a story in Genesis that Jacob, after he wrestles with the angel, he is limping in his thigh, and so we don't eat that part of the animal. In America, it's not economical for a meat packing plant to remove the sciatic nerve. They just cut the animal in half, and the whole backside they sell to a non-kosher division of the meat company, and the rest they kosher meat. In other times and places, we don't have to talk about this also. You can remove the non-kosher part, the sciatic nerve, and then um, and you can get kosher sirloin, but it's almost impossible to find in America. In Israel, it's more economical. Do you have the sheet from last time? Do you want to? I'm happy to print you another copy if that would be.
That's okay. Just brought the wrong notebook.
Oh, would you like me to print it out for another copy? Okay, fine. All right. So, um, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. Okay, and then there are like certain types of fats and stuff the Torah lists as not being kosher, and that's all listed in the Torah, and that all again like is applied today. Kosher species, non-kosher species, and the non-kosher parts of kosher animals, which is basically sciatic nerve and certain of the fats that are in the back part of the animal. Which as a consumer, that's not really relevant. Like you wouldn't, but the other part of a kosher animal that is non-kosher is the blood of the animal. Okay. And so kosher chicken, poultry and meat, the blood is at the time of the animal slaughtered, blood is drained a little bit, and then the meat is salted and soaked to remove some of the blood. And that's also more or less clear in the Torah, and that's also like a non-kosher part of a kosher animal. The meat is not kosher until it's been soaked and salted. This is used to be done in people's homes. You would buy meat from your butcher shop, or you would take your chicken to the person to slaughter it. You take it home, and you would do the soaking and salting yourself. Every Jewish girl would learn from her mother how to soak and salt kosher meat. This is not. It's almost. I don't think anyone under the age of 60 has done this, or under the age of 70 has done this. It's all done now in the butcher shops or in the meat packing plants, and the kosher meat that you buy in the store has already been soaked and salted. So I don't. I've in my life I've done it once. And I think that's one time more than almost everyone else that I know. Okay, it's really it happens, but just not in people's homes or so. But that's also again that's also hinted at in the Torah, described in the Torah, and but the process, of course, it develops over time. But that also is like a non-kosher part of a kosher animal. Um, okay. However, number C, letter C, methods of absorption of taste. The major addition or innovation or I don't know aspect of keeping kosher that is core to our lifestyle as observant Jews that you would not know just from reading the Torah, on your own, is that we don't just care about non-kosher foods, we also care about their taste. So it's not just the thing itself, it's the taste of that thing. And so in Hebrew, ta'am ki ikar, um, which means the taste is like the thing itself, which means that, let's say, so some examples of that. So I don't know, let's say, bacon is not kosher. So not only do we not eat bacon, we also don't eat things that have absorbed the taste of bacon. So if some bacon falls into your chicken soup, even if you remove it, its taste has infused your chicken soup. That chicken soup is not kosher because bacon has infused the taste. Little piece of pork fat falls into some chunk of lard falls into your vegetable stew, and it's dissolved, and you can't remove it, you can't see it. If there's enough of it to leave a taste, then the entire stew is not kosher. If it doesn't leave a taste, then it remains kosher. We assume foods impart taste at 1/60th their volume. That's like the basic assumption. So 1 cubic centimeter of lard falls into 70 cubic centimeters of something kosher. We assume the mixture is kosher because the lard has not imparted any taste. If it's less than 1 in 60, a ratio of 1/60th, or there's more non-kosher than 1 in 60, one part in 60, then the entire um, pot, stew, whatever it is considered non-kosher. So that's one application of this principle. The taste is like the thing itself. Again, you wouldn't know that from the Torah, but that is, sort of important to how we keep kosher. We're not just concerned about the thing, we're also concerned about the taste of that thing. So far, so good.
What about ground beef? That can still be kosher
So,
if the sciatic nerve is cut and.
so if the let's say let's one step back.
Mhm.
We should have said this also. Kosher meat also has to be slaughtered ritually by a observant Jewish man who is slaughtering the animal according to the rules of kosher slaughter. And that's also a difference between kosher meat. So kosher meat is slaughtered. It's not just so the species are kosher. It has to be, that's also in the Torah. The Torah kind of says this as well. The meat has to be, so slaughtering means a very, very sharp knife. The trachea and esophagus are cut in one pull of the knife, which is super sharp, no nicks. The animal dies instantly or almost instantly, and then the blood is drained, and then the meat is cut up. Sciatic nerve is removed, the fin parts are removed, and the meat is soaked and salted. So you can't just buy beef in a not regular beef, even if it's 100% beef from a random supermarket is absolutely not kosher because it has not been slaughtered or soaked and salted. Kosher meat from you get it truth is you could get it at Trader Joe's sometimes or wherever. That animal was slaughtered by a observant Jewish man, specially trained in ritual slaughter, and then the meat was soaked and salted before it was sold. Okay, so that meat could be ground, it could be all sorts of cuts. You can get ground beef, you can get
But it's still soaked and salted.
sorry, yeah, exactly. Sorry, that was yes. Sorry for not answering your question. They actually soak and salt large pieces of meat, and then they cut into smaller pieces and sell it. Yeah, thank you for it. Yeah, which is why you also probably don't have to add salt to kosher chicken because it was already soaked and salted. It has plenty of salt already. You don't have that's like a general cooking rule. But any recipe that involves salt on your chicken, you can skip the salt because it probably got all the salt it needed from the salt. Okay. Okay, so in the Torah, we have, reference to slaughter. Torah has reference to, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Question about the things falling into something
Yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah.
Does the temperature of the thing that it falls into affect
Yes.
the spreading of the
Yes, it
taste?
does. The temperature does. Yeah, absolutely. So if the substance falls in and is diffused in it, the temperature doesn't matter because it's there itself. 1/60th is there itself. Temperature matters. Um, when we have, because we're also concerned that taste can be absorbed into pots and pans or silverware and then expunged out of those pots and pans and silverware into the next object that is cooked using those things. This sounds a little weird. If it sounds weird to you, that's only because you've used it's 2026 and you use stainless steel in your kitchen, but stainless steel was invented relatively recently. It's a 20th century innovation, I believe. If you use a cast iron skillet, you know that it will, in fact, absorb taste of things that are cooked in it, and then it will expunge that taste into the next thing you cook. And people like that, actually, sometimes. But if you were to cook something in a cast iron pot, we were concerned, the rabbis were concerned already thousands of years ago, if you cook something in a earthenware pot, they were concerned that it's absorbing the flavor of the thing that is cooking, and then the next thing you cook, that flavor is expunged. That's only if it's hot. If it's cold, the assumption is flavor isn't transferred. So that's a very important rule of like kosher food, that we were concerned about flavor and taste being absorbed from one thing to the next um, under conditions of heat, and therefore that's why kosher food has to be cooked only in kosher pots and pans. Because a non-kosher pot, you cook your clam chowder in a pot. That pot absorbs the taste of the clam chowder in the walls of that pot. You then cook pasta the next day, and the clam chowder taste goes into your pasta. You may not be able to taste the clam chowder, but the assumption is it's probably you have to be worried about it anyway. And with stainless steel, again, which is a modern invention, maybe it doesn't really absorb, and maybe we don't have to be quite as careful as we used to be. But again, that's a very modern innovation, stainless steel, and for thousands of years it was a very real concern, and so it still is there as a practice. And so we kosher food is food that was cooked in kosher pots and pans and kosher, and used with kosher silverware because of this issue of if, however, you were to take, let's say you're staying at a hotel or you're staying at a non-Jewish friend's house and they offer you breakfast. So they offer you Cheerios and milk, which is kosher, right? And so, but they don't have their bowls and spoons, whatever, are not kosher. And they use those bowls for clam chowder the night before, and you want to use it for Cheerios this morning. Okay. So that's not going to be a problem because it's cold. The milk is cold, Cheerios are cold. And so the taste of the clam chowder is not going to be expunged into your um, Cheerios. The Cheerios are fine. Let's say you have a non-Jewish friend staying with you and they get up early and eat breakfast and they bought camel milk to have with their cereal because it's like very healthy or something. Okay. So have they rendered your bowls not kosher? The answer is no, because the milk was cold. And so even though the non-kosher substance was poured in your kosher bowl, it doesn't matter. It's cold. There's no transfer of taste. So this is really not, you would not find hints to this in the Torah. It's like several degrees of assumption. Assumption that we're concerned not just about the non-kosher substance, but the taste of that non-kosher substance. B, we're concerned that taste can be absorbed into pots and pans and silverware and then expunged, the next time it's something is cooked in that same pot pan, or you use the spatula to cook something else. Okay. Someone fries bacon with the spatula and then use that spatula to fry an egg. That egg is going to end up tasting like bacon because the bacon goes into the frying pan. From the frying pan, it goes into your eggs. And so the eggs are now not kosher. But there are some exceptions to this rule as well. And that is, so one is, we talked about temperature. If it's not piping hot, then we're not concerned that taste is going to be transferred. We saw the example of 1/60th, if only 1/60th is in this mixture. So let's say instead of frying bacon with the spatula, let's say a tiny little drop of like a 1 cc of lard in my whatever, in my 60 cc of a stew, and I'm stirring it with a ladle. We're not going to be concerned about that 1 cc of lard. It's just going to be nullified in 60 times its volume. The ladle's kosher, the soup is kosher, the ladle's kosher, and that's fine. So temperature, so volume is one exception. Temperature is an exception. Another exception is if the taste is a rancid taste, then we're not worried about it rendering something else non-kosher. This rule that the taste of something non-kosher is just like the non-kosher thing itself for rendering the thing it falls into non-kosher is only true if is not true when the taste is a rancid, old, spoiled taste. And every taste that's absorbed inside a pot or pan or a spatula becomes rancid after 24 hours. So Sunday morning, non-Jewish friend fries some bacon using a spatula. 24 hours later, Monday morning, you use that same spatula to um, make some eggs. The eggs are going to be kosher. Because even though the spatula absorbed the taste of the bacon, 24 hours goes by, that taste absorbed in the spatula becomes rancid, and then whatever taste is expunged from the spatula into your eggs is a rancid bacon taste, and so it can't render the eggs non-kosher. So the eggs are fine if 24 hours have elapsed, which often gets you out of a lot of trouble in mistakes that happen, accidents in the kitchen. Usually, and almost always we can assume that the thing wasn't used within 24 hours. All right, so far so good, everyone, right? I just said a lot of, this was like, this was like 5 months of rabbinical school in yeshiva going through. I just like summarized in 2 minutes. Questions, comments? Okay. There's another exception to the exception, and that is hot, spicy things can freshen up and awaken rancid tastes. So if you saute an onion with a spatula that was used for cooking bacon even more than 24 hours ago, the onions aren't kosher. And so so that's an exception to this exception. Okay, so these are the rules of how taste is transferred. The heat necessary for transferring taste, we generally say is so hot that your hand recoils from touching it, um, which is one version in the Talmud. The other version of the Talmud is so hot that your hand isn't able to hold on to it. More or less seems to be the same, two different ways of describing the same temperature. Another version describing the Talmud is so hot that it will burn the belly of a baby, which you should not try at home, but that's all basically variations of the same heat. And there are various definitions that have been offered of what actually, in Fahrenheit, what actually that is. But I would say you know it when you experience it, right? If your hand recoils, then that's hot enough for taste to transfer. But it's worth knowing that if you're doing dishes by hand, by definition, it's not going to be hot enough for this taste, right? Your hands are there in the water with, on the sponge. And so if you accidentally, oh my gosh, that was my bacon spatula that you were washing with, so, well, I washed my hand. So it wasn't so hot that I couldn't put my hands in it. And so there was no taste transfer. Okay. Still to be concerned about the actual mamish, the actual substance of the forbidden, but assuming things are basically clean, you don't have chunks of the non-kosher food anymore. It's just a basically clean, rinsed off thing. You're only worried about the taste that's absorbed, being transferred from one thing to the next. If you're washing dishes or whatever by hand, it's not going to be so hot for that to become a problem. Okay. Questions, comments? Okay. Let's go on. Dairy and meat. Torah says 3 times, Lo tevashel gedi b'chelev imo, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. This was understood by the rabbis to mean we don't cook any dairy with meat. We don't eat meat that was cooked together with dairy, nor do we derive benefit from dairy and meat that have been cooked together. Deriving benefit means you can't feed it to a friend or sell it or feed it to your animal. So if the meat and dairy have been cooked together, and any kind of meat and dairy, not just a kid and its own mother's milk. Okay. This is not biblically, we understand this to be not applied to chicken or birds, since only mammals have milk, so that makes a certain amount of sense. But the rabbis, as a fence around the Torah, say this prohibition also applies to poultry and dairy. And so so we don't cook any meat with dairy, or any meat, chicken, whatever. Okay.
No chicken cutlets.
No chicken cutlets with dairy. You can make chicken cutlets without dairy. You can, yeah. In fact, until you said that, I don't think I had realized that people that don't keep kosher make chicken cutlets with dairy. How do you just you base them in milk or something? Or you?
Eggs.
Okay, so eggs are fine. Eggs are okay. Eggs are neutral, and you can cook eggs with meat or chicken. Okay, it's only milk.
With chicken.
Yes, yes, it's the kind. I understand the concept. It sounds very similar. It's like the two generations. It's fine. Eggs are considered neutral. The Hebrew word for that is, or the Yiddish word is parev. It's neutral, neither meat nor dairy. So eggs you can have with dairy, or you can have eggs with meat.
Mm.
Eggs can have a blood spot, correct. Well, if the eggs have a blood spot, then that's a problem with blood, or it's a problem if it's turning. Yeah, um, correct. Um, so you can base your chicken cutlets in eggs, just not milk, and you can cook your eggs with cheese if you want. If you like making scrambled eggs, you can make them with cheese. Okay. Uh,
So, got a
yeah,
question.
sure.
So, how did the rabbis make the leap from the prohibition of boiling the calf in its mother's milk all the way up to no meat and dairy? So, why not kosher goat cheese with kosher beef, or even
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's. I would say short answer is I don't really. I mean, the short and long answer. I don't know. It's a good question. In other words, it could be very specific. A kid in its own mother's milk, or it could mean anything in the milk of that same species. The rabbis understood it to be pretty general. I would say many of the mitzvot of the Torah are phrased in um, like a specific example, and if two men are walking, one says, like it's very like casuistic, I think is the word. Like it gives you, the Torah doesn't give mitzvot with like broad legal principles. It gives us cases. If two men are fighting and the wife of one of them does it, right? Like, what if it's three men fighting? What if it's not his wife? What if it's like so all of the right almost every time the Torah gives a mitzvah, it does so in a casuistic way, shares a case, a particular circumstance where something happens, and then the rule is what follows, and then it's left for the reader or for tradition, for the oral Torah to tell us which of these details are legally significant and which are not. And how do we abstract from this particular case to make a general law? So I would say it's not, it's maybe it's particularly striking in this example because the Torah's phrasing is so particular and specific, and we apply it in such a broad way. But I think actually, maybe every mitzvah in the Torah, like that question could be asked, and the tradition gives us an answer for every mitzvah in the Torah, how broad or how narrow we interpret the particular case in which the mitzvah was taught. So it's a good question, but so we do it pretty broadly. I mean, I think, and that's, at the very beginning of this class, we talked about the oral Torah, and with the oral Torah, this tradition of how to understand the written Torah. What does the written Torah mean? And I just like that's you see here very clearly the Torah is so it's so opaque or obscure or vague or subject to 1,000 different interpretations. And if we're all going to eat in each other's homes, there has to be a method for determining what the legal meaning of this verse is. Like if we're engaging in biblical scholarship and interpretation, and you can interpret, let 1,000 flowers bloom. But if we want to eat in each other's kitchens, we're going to have one interpretation of what these words mean, and come to some consensus about how to live our lives based on these verses in the Torah. And so, all dairy, all meat, if they're cooked, and if they've been cooked together, that's a biblical prohibition. And then therefore, the prohibition is the cooking and the eating once they've been cooked together, and the driving benefit as well. Same rules as apply for transfer of taste and absorption of taste also apply for dairy and meat. So just as so a drop of milk that falls into your chicken soup, if it's less than 1/60th, the mixture is fine. If it's more than 1/60th, the entire mixture becomes forbidden because it's a forbidden mixture of dairy and meat. If you cook meat in your dairy frying pan, then the meat is non-kosher because it absorbs the taste from the dairy frying pan. If the dairy frying pan has not been used in 24 hours, the meat that you cook in it is kosher because it has absorbed rancid dairy taste that's more than 24 hours old. So the meat is kosher. The frying pan, though, is non-kosher because it's absorbed, it has the meat and the dairy tastes absorbed inside it. So the frying pan now is no longer kosher, has to be purified if possible or discarded. But the food that you cook in that particular instance is kosher. This is um, Orthodox rabbis get lots of questions about kitchen accidents. Okay, so it's common to text or call a rabbi and say, "Oh, I accidentally used my dairy spatula to make my this," and I thought, or my mother was visiting and she didn't know, and she used my dairy bowls to serve the chicken soup, and what can I, and often the solution is that it's not so bad, and we have a way of resolving, but but not always, and so yeah, um, yeah, that's so.
That's usually the resolution.
Sorry.
What's usually in those cases?
Depends. Every case is
Yeah.
distinct. Like often, often we can salvage the food or salvage the frying pan or the spoon, but not always. And so it depends on the circumstance. But it's worth asking because, sometimes people panic and like, oh my gosh, I did this mistake. But like, okay, like the mistake is to avoid, um, like we set up our kosher kitchens to keep dairy and meat from ever interacting, and we set up our kosher kitchens so that non-kosher foods generally never come into our kitchens. And then we have, all the laws of kosher food, which is all about what happens if there's an accident and if there's that and we figure out and we figure out the circumstances. Somebody compared this to learning how to drive a car versus reading an insurance company accident report, right? Like or a an accident report is, the blue car going 40 miles per hour, went through the red light and tipped the yellow car at 90-degree angle at 40 miles, and the consequences were the car was totaled, the car wasn't totaled, this person was injured, this person walked away, and you read the report of what happened when these two cars collided, and there are consequences, and the consequences can be not so bad, they can be terrible, and you read police reports or insurance company reports, and you read many, many cases of all sorts of accidents that occur and crashes and things like that. The learning how to drive is avoiding accidents, right? Like, it's an entirely different set of skills and set of knowledge is how do I keep my car from crashing into another car versus when the cars crash, what are the consequences? So, volumes and volumes of what happens when dairy gets into my meat and meat gets into my dairy and which quantities under which circumstances and when do I know and how do I, right? But we set up our kitchens to avoid those mixtures. So we have separate plates for dairy and meat. We have separate pots and pans for dairy and meat. We have separate silverware for dairy and meat. Um,
Sponges, racks.
Separate sponges so that we can wash them separately. If you're blessed to have two sinks, that makes it very easy. If you don't have two sinks, you put a sink liner in or a rack in your sink for dairy and for meat so that you don't have meat dishes with the dirty meat stuff soaking in your sink that you're also going to use that same sink for your dairy dishes soaking in that same sink. So you put a racks so they're never actually touching the sink. So the dairy touching the dairy rack only, the meat touches the meat rack only, and neither of them are ever touching the actual sink itself. Questions, comments? Okay.
I do have a-
Yeah, please. Yeah, yeah. Oh, can I say?
So the reason that what I understand is the reason that like chicken and dairy can't be eaten together is because one of the reasons is because it might have the appearance of eating
Yeah,
other meat,
yeah,
a mammal meat and
right.
dairy together. But there seems to be allowances for eating like faux meat
Yeah,
and dairy together, even though that
yeah.
also gives the appearance of
Good.
eating
Okay.
meat and dairy together.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if it's just a matter of tradition because like the meat and chicken or dairy and chicken together is
Old.
old and faux meat and
Yeah.
dairy together is new.
Yeah. So I'll give you I'll give you an earlier. What did I do? I'll give you an earlier. I'll give you an earlier case, which language exists. Foam meat, because foam meat is relatively new, but a much older phenomenon would be non-dairy, not much older, but non-dairy creamer is actually a good, an older. So there are two principles. One is not eating chicken and so first of all, there's actually three opinions in the Talmud about poultry and dairy. One position is that it's also included in the biblical prohibition, so it might actually be equally prohibited as under the rubric of the biblical prohibition. After all, chickens have to be slaughtered ritually, so maybe therefore they should be like meat, right? The other opinion that's actually permissible, and you can eat dairy and poultry together. And the third opinion, which is the one that we follow, is that it's a rabbinic prohibition. But the rabbinic prohibition means it was a rabbinic decree, meaning it was an act of legislation. Um, so once the legislative act is complete, it's forbidden. Not forbidden by force of Torah law, but forbidden by force of rabbinic legislation. There's a separate principle, which is we don't do things that look as though we're doing something forbidden, maybe because it misleads others and they're confused, or it makes it looks like we're doing something. So we're not supposed to, it's called in Hebrew marit ayin, or some people pronounce it maris ayin, um, not doing something that looks like you're doing something forbidden, even if you're not. And so that seems to be determined not only by the like objective way that what you're doing looks like, but also by the sociological understanding of. So once upon a time, when non-dairy creamer was first invented, they said, if you want to serve non-dairy creamer at, your meat meal, put the jar, the canister on the table. So it'd be, which you wouldn't otherwise like imagine like it's a wedding reception or something. And so everyone's eating very fancy food on fine china, and they serve dessert with coffee, and they put out the little coffee creamer. They would put it says whatever, a fake milk, whatever, not Pareve, non-dairy creamer that, whatever, Riches, not, they put the little carton, coffee mate, yes, put the carton on the table so everyone knows that um, that you're not doing the forbidden thing. There's actually an earlier example, which is kind of gross, but an earlier example which goes back, I think, to the 16th century, maybe earlier. As we mentioned, you're not allowed to consume blood. You are allowed to consume fish blood. Fish have their own. We haven't talked about fish. They have their own just categories. Fish are not considered meat for these rules, or they don't have to be slaughtered, and you're allowed to consume fish blood. So the sources say if you're going to drink fish blood, put some scales in the cup so everyone knows that it's fish blood and not animal blood. I apologize. That's kind of a gross image, but I get, whatever. I guess people consider it a delicacy in some places, maybe. So that's another example of should demonstrate that you're not doing the forbidden thing. I don't think people put the carton of non-dairy creamer on the table anymore because everyone knows now that non-dairy creamer is a thing. It's a commonly bought and sold substance. Its entire shelves of the supermarket are, milk alternatives. And so I think the assumption is I'm at a kosher restaurant, I'm at a kosher home, I'm at a kosher wedding. The creamer that they serve at the end of the meal is a non-dairy creamer, and it's sort of obvious to everyone that, there's no and so that concern is mitigated. And I think the same would be the case of everyone knows that there's all sorts of plant-derived meat alternatives now. And so the concern wouldn't apply. I wonder, there's like the cutting edge of these laws of kosher. Some of these, they now have in Israel, you can get like artificially like laboratory, like plant-derived milk proteins. So on a chemical level, it's identical to milk, but it comes from plants, and that's considered not to be dairy. So you can make cheese and have milk, and it's like it really I haven't tried it actually, but they say it like should taste exactly like milk, and under a microscope, it's exactly like milk, but it comes from plants. So that's like maybe a little more cutting edge, or lab grown meat, which, from stem cells, that's, right, which is, I think, not yet on the market, but maybe will be on the market very soon. Probably doesn't have the status of meat in Jewish law. So we're on the cusp of like some like radical revisions to some of these rules with this new technology. But I think the more people know about it, the less the concern is, oh, it looks like you're doing something forbidden. No, it looks like I'm eating an Impossible Burger, like or whatever. I think that's known. Another example, you go into a non-kosher restaurant and you order a cup of coffee or have a Diet Coke or something. Why would you do that? Because you're at a business meeting or you're eating with some friends and whatever. So I think once upon a time, or maybe in certain places, it would be considered forbidden to go into a non-kosher restaurant and have a cup of coffee or a glass of water or something. But it became because it looks like you're doing something forbidden. It looks like what's a Jewish person, an observant Jew going into a non-kosher restaurant? But now everyone knows that, you know, Jewish attorneys, whatever, they take out clients, non-kosher restaurants, they just have coffee or they have a plain salad or something, and that's like a comment, certainly in New York, that everyone knows that you would go to business lunches and non-kosher restaurants and not eat anything. And so to be in those restaurants is not a violation of this concern because everyone knows that it's okay that you're not doing anything forbidden. It doesn't look like you're doing something forbidden because the common knowledge is that observant Jews go to non-kosher restaurants and don't eat there. So I think that there's like a sociological element as well of sort of what people are used to. So that makes good. It's a long answer to a very good question. Very good question. Questions, comments? Okay. Anything? Okay, we'll do letter E. Oh, actually, and the truth is, E and F. F we already did. We just did it out of order. And E, I'll just say we don't eat insects. Insects are not kosher, except for certain species of locusts and grasshoppers. the Yemenite Jews and some of the Moroccan Jews have preserved the tradition of which types of grasshoppers and locusts are kosher. The rest of us have lost that knowledge, although today in Israel you can buy certified kosher locusts, which I guess based on this tradition of the Yemenites or the Moroccans or whomever. I've never tried this, but there are communities that have this information intact, and I think there is an attempt to try to revive this practice of Jews eating these insects. But otherwise, insects are forbidden, which means that we have to clean our fruits and vegetables to make sure they're not infested with insects. Some people, this was actually an area where some Jews do this with great, tremendous care and attention, and will not eat lettuce unless they've examined the leaves under a light box, to like really make sure they get all the insects. It's been washed like very, very thoroughly. I think a more reasonable assumption is that well, things that are not visible to the naked eye are not subject to this prohibition, but you still want to make sure that you're not missing them just because they're camouflaged really well. So leafy vegetables and the things that are subject to infestation should be soaked in water. Some people add a drop of soap. So I don't. I had a drop of vinegar, which is supposed to stun the insects a little bit so they lose their grip, and you sort of vigorously soak, and then you rinse really well. And in that way, you avoid eating insects. Okay. But this, if you spend time with Orthodox Jews, you should. Some of us are very, very strict and meticulous in avoiding insects in their food, and others just make sure to wash. But insects are forbidden, so it's worth putting some effort into removing insects from food. Um, um, and you may ask, why are the insects less than 1/60th the volume of the salad? Why do you care? Good question. Okay. So the answer is an insect is an intact organism, and an intact organism is not nullified even in more than 60 times its volume. So it's an exception. It's one of the exceptions to that rule of nullification of 60 times. Um, Another exception to the rule of nullification is any leavened product, any bread product on Passover is also not nullified, even in more than 60 times its volume. And so that's why we're so extra crazy about cleaning our kitchens and getting, and avoiding any potential hint of contamination on Passover, because throughout the year, a little drop of something non-kosher is nullified in 60. A little bit of milk in our dairy in our meat is going to be nullified in 60 times. But even a speck of grain in a massive quantity of food is not nullified on Passover. And so that sort of explains this process we're going through. However, it is nullified before Passover. So if you have a product, which is, a simple product like roasted almonds or 100% pure orange juice, something like that, you purchase it before Passover, whatever potential minute infestation with a grain of chametz, of leavened product, is going to be nullified before Passover, and then you're safe to go on Passover itself. So a lot of us try to do most of our purchases before Passover of basic ingredients with not processed foods, and then that would be sufficient. But for any processed foods with multiple ingredients, we try to get certified, not just certified kosher, but certified kosher for Passover, which is why I recommend go to one of the separate kosher supermarkets before the holiday to augment what you can get locally. Um, Letter G, fish and meat. Fish, we said fish is not meat, so you can have fish with meat, you can have fish with dairy. Fish doesn't have to be slaughtered ritually, just, so it's sort of a interesting, avoids, as long as you can verify it's kosher. There's actually a lot of fraud in the fish market in America, and so you should, um, and so to make sure that they're not selling catfish and pretending it's trout or something, you should only buy fish either from a certified kosher place or fish where you can see that it's from a kosher. You as the consumer can verify that it is from a kosher species because you see the whole fish, or you can see it's a fillet with the skin left on. You can tell that it once had scales, or had scales, has scales, or it's, if it's pink, it's salmon, or so there's no pink fleshed fish that isn't kosher. So if it's pink, it's kosher. a kosher species. But so the cut you get, you shouldn't get a fillet without the skin unless it's pink or from a kosher supermarket or something. Questions or comments on this? Yeah.
Can you buy fish from a market where they are doing like all of the seafood processing on the same?
Very good. So yeah, so they're cutting non-kosher and kosher fishes. They're chopping them up in the same. So you can't. So let's. The concern would be they're using the same knife to chop up a catfish and to chop up your salmon, um, so without washing the knife in between. So they probably wash the knife off between. But okay. So either way, though, the knife is cold, the fish is cold. So maybe there's a little bit of catfish juice or something on the knife that then they use. So what you should do if you buy fish from a non-kosher fishmonger is you should rinse it in cold water before cooking it. So that's a good question. But if you rinse it in cold water, it should be fine. And that's again because the knife is cold, the fish is cold, and so yeah, it's a good question. Okay, anything else? I think it's our last class for a couple of weeks. Um, but I think the next class is already on the calendar. So thank you so much, and please feel free to be in touch in the meantime if I can be helpful to you guys. And if I don't speak to you before, have a happy Pesach, happy Passover, and thank you so much for joining. All right. All right.